Hey, hey, folks! It is Adair Schmidt here with Project Sanity tonight. Tonight we have got a great lineup. For those of you who saw via Twitter, our first guest this evening.
Adair, we're still muted on OBS. It looks like so. Nope. Maybe I'm just seeing an old. Go ahead.
All right. Sorry about that, folks. If there was just a random pause and you heard a bunch of us talking, there is technical issues going on our end, so we do apologize for that. Thank you, though, for being so patient and sticking with us. Tonight, we will have State Representative from here in Washington State, Noel come on. For those of you who have read the article that was written by Andre of Progressive Army, there has been a bit of what you could call a kerfuffle at the King County Democrats reorganization meeting. So we will have the first hour dedicated to that conversation, specifically about how do we address allies when they have said and or done something racist and how we move forward from that. Following up with that, we have a surprise guest who was just booked a day or two ago. Her name is Brittany. That's going to be a wonderful conversation. I really suggest that y'all stick around for that. And then in the second hour, my co-host, Platonic, Socratic, Aristotelian life partner, person who I usually can't stand 98.9% of the time, Brandon Sutton, will join us for a roundtable conversation. But before that, I am joined by my friend, one of the co-creators of the show, and just an all-around great guy, Richard Green.
Thank you for the introduction and welcome, Adair, and I'm looking forward to today's show. It seems like it's going to be quite interesting. I just had a chance to look over what the incident that we're talking about, and I'm glad that we're going to be able to have a conversation about what happened and how to move forward, and largely or also about what the growing pains or shifting pains of changing the Democratic Party's structure and or leadership is looking like, and how we're going to go about making that something that seems appealing to the folks that really want progressive change in our political system.
All right, and with that, without further ado, let's bring in Noel Frame. Noel, please feel free to unmute yourself. Just a heads up, folks at home, I can't really see what's going on, so I'm going to be relying on Brandon, who's reading the comments, and Richard, who has got a better Google Hangouts picture than I do, to let me know what's going on, what everyone's doing, because I can only kind of see what's going out to YouTube right now. But Noel, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
We're very happy to have you.
I'm happy to be here.
So, and with that, without further ado, I mean, let's really jump into things. We are running behind. So, for those of you who do not know, actually, you know what, Noel, if you would like to give your explanation or your thoughts on what happened, or explain what happened rather at the reorg meeting, I'd rather get it from somebody who was involved than someone like myself who was 60 miles away.
Sure. Well, and without getting into the whole issue, and right. I'll leave it to you how much you want to dig in. But in the context of an action that I took, I used language that was perceived and received as racist. I screwed up. I had, in a statement that I wrote, there was a piece of language, I'll actually read it to you in a second, that it didn't occur to me when I wrote it that it might be received and heard as racist. I know what my intent was, but the impact of it was that it felt like racist language. It was about a day before somebody pointed it out to me. And of course, when it was pointed out to me, I apologized immediately, personally to the person and publicly, because I understood exactly what the problem was as soon as somebody pointed it out to me. But it's one of those things where it wasn't my intent. And I'm looking forward to this conversation around, what that looks like. So, and how we talked about it. So, Adair, right. Would you like me to read the passage now?
Yeah, that would be great. And then we'll jump right into the conversation. I'm sure Richard probably has a few questions to start things off.
You got it. Please. Yeah. So when I asked somebody to read a statement for me as we were looking at, leadership for the Democratic Party. And, this was basically the beginning of the statement. I said, we should be weighing factors as we choose not only the chair of this local party, but all leadership positions. And I asked people to consider the following. And I'm going to give you a little bit of lead in, and I'll end with the statement that was the problem. I said, we should consider, has the person seeking a leadership position today demonstrated the interpersonal skills necessary to effectively lead this organization? We are a large, diverse group. We don't agree all the time, and we need leaders who can effectively communicate across those differences and bring people together. We need bridge builders, not bomb throwers. Yes. And it is that last sentence, that we need bridge builders, not bomb throwers, that it didn't occur to me when I wrote it, but it was received as racist. And that is what has kicked off a lot of this conversation. It was perceived as racist because the person that I was talking about or leading up to, I had not mentioned his name at this point in the statement, is an Iraqi American man. And that is part of why it was received as racist. So I'll let you take it from there, Dare.
And just real quick for our viewers at home, as I do want to make sure that we hold as much of our journalistic integrity as possible, I will fully admit to being 100% friends with both Noel Frame and the person that received these comments at the King County Democrats meeting. I have expressed my support for him in his dealing with racism in general. I have also and will have intimated to both of them, and I will stand by this now, that I will stake my personal and professional reputation on the fact that I do not believe that Noel Frame is a racist. I will say that now. I am friends with both. I have gone through both and told them, hey, this is what we will be covering tonight. But I want to make sure you, that our viewers at home, understand that I am trying my utmost to be biased, and Richard can attest to this. I did say I would recuse myself from this conversation if that would give us the highest level of journalistic integrity, because that's one of our most important things here. Real quick, I'm going to pass things over to Richard, and then I'm going to hop off real quick because I'm getting some issues coming in from viewers trying to watch who are unable to. So I will be back shortly. Richard, I'm going to toss it over to you, my friend.
All right. I want to thank you again for joining us, Noel. I really appreciate it, and appreciate the work that you've been doing within the party at large and at the state convention. I know that was quite the endeavor, and so I appreciate your efforts there sincerely. And so I know that the points that you're making regarding the skills and the traits that you think are required of that position are important, come from a place of somebody who has dealt with those specific issues that you're mentioning, and so that it comes from an informed place. I do have some issues now. I did just kind of come to this recently, and so I haven't had a chance to look too closely, but on a larger reorganization kind of aspect, there's something I want to start with just the very, very first part of, you said just recently that you had someone read a statement.
Yep.
From what I've gathered, it wasn't so much somebody reading a statement as in a normal order of statement reading, but it was someone who was nominated and seconded for a position that they didn't intend to run for. And so I just wanted you to talk a little bit about the parliamentary procedure regarding that, and why you think that that's not problematic, or if you think that there is a little problem with using parliamentary procedure in that way.
Sure. So, and just for context, I mean, so for folks that are not really familiar what happened, essentially somebody was running for chair of a local Democratic Party that I had deep concerns about that person serving in that position, given my personal experience with that person. The context, and and that's this topic is not the point of this show. So Richard, you ask me what questions you want, but I had a concern about this person being physically aggressive. I felt it was incumbent upon me to raise my voice at a critical point to raise that issue. The challenge was that this person declared their candidacy 2 days before the campaign. I was literally on the other side of the country, which is why I had somebody read a statement and not be there myself. Otherwise, I absolutely would have been. And there were very limited options for how to convey my concern. I felt like I had very imperfect options. And I will tell you, I chose to have somebody read a statement using a parliamentary option. And for me, that felt like a good option because it would keep my concern in the room for the people that were voting on this, which was about 400 people. I felt like my only alternative was to send an email out to 1,400 people, many of which I knew would not be there, and it wouldn't have an impact. It was an unnecessary piece of information going out. So that's why I chose the option that I did. Now, I will just tell you, it was not sort of a parliamentary trick. I've apologized to the King County Democrats now publicly for taking advantage of that. And I think more than anything, what I'm apologizing for and what's sad about, and I think that this part I didn't really anticipate, is I know now by using a parliamentary rule like that, I played into people's fears and suspicions about the Democratic Party being corrupt or, unfair. And that I really regret, because I've spent my entire year working with my fellow Bernie Sanders supporters trying to encourage more people to come into the party. And I know that I have in that action inadvertently, just left people disillusioned. And so I apologize for that publicly earlier this week. So I hope that helps answer the question.
Absolutely. Go ahead, Adair.
That does. And so I'm glad we got that out of the way. And at least now our viewers have even more context. So what I want to do right now is I want to base this conversation and what we do in party when things like this happen, as Noel has experienced it from the end of having inadvertently said something racist. And both Rich and I have frankly dealt with people saying and or doing things either inadvertently, which we try to give people the benefit of the doubt unless we're really angry that day or just are kind of fed up, and inadvertently saying and or doing racist things. The biggest issue that I have is a lot of folks don't realize, and you stated this earlier, Noel, and for those of you who don't know, I had called Noel before she came on, and that's how we ended up booking her. I was like, hey, had a nice phone call, but one of the things that really is important about talking here is that idea of intent versus impact, because the conversation too often turns into the I don't know, the person making the statement that is racist, right? Because there's no getting around it. If a statement is racist, That doesn't mean the person is racist, but the statement might be. It usually goes around with that person getting all up in their feelings and saying, but you're hurting my feelings by accusing me of saying something racist, and I'm, member of X underrepresented group, be they gay, be they trans, be they, whatever. But if they're white and they're saying these things, they usually use that as a shield, or my favorite one, the one I get so often, but I'm a liberal, I can't be racist. Yeah. Like that idea that their intent is what matters more than the actual impact of the statement, unless that situation is reversed, when you call them out and say, hey, you really, like, the impact of your words really offended me. And like, but that's not my intent, and your impact is really, really mean, and it's hurting my feelings. So how do we adjust that? I mean, well, rather address that. I feel from my perspective, and Richard, I think you agree, is we just call shit out when we see it. And forgive me, and I know this is your channel, but like that's the only way I can think to characterize it. Well, how would you say you approach that as someone who has done actually quite a bit of work in allyship? She's been absolutely amazing in trying to get people of color involved in politics, is one of the people that has helped me make as many connections as I have. And the viewers will actually reap those benefits as we get more of those people on what's going on.
Well, and I think that, I want to go back to what I said it already, but I think, Adair, you just created a good contrast. So as I explained it, the moment that somebody, mentioned this to me, there was like a 12-hour lag because I was on the East Coast and sleeping in between this time. But, almost immediately when somebody pointed out to me, I didn't get defensive. I didn't say what Adair just articulated, where I said, well, that wasn't the point. And, just because I didn't mean it, you shouldn't be offended. No, quite the opposite. I said, as soon as somebody pointed out to me, I recognized immediately that impact was felt differently than what it was intended. And I apologized immediately, because I can't tell you that the way that you're feeling it, the impact that it had on you, is wrong, any more than you can't say to me that my intent was wrong, right? So rather than being defensive, it's an immediate acknowledgement. I took an immediate acknowledgement that, that was received in a way that was really negative and felt racist. And I am lucky as a, white woman to have been through several trainings. Starting 10 years ago, I was in Leadership Tomorrow, and we did a 2-day retreat. They straight up called it the racism retreat. And I spent 2 days in conversation with people of color and other white folks. And there's a lot of tears that weekend. I mean, a lot of tears, but so much learning. And 10 years later, there are people in that group that I'm still really close with. I've had that opportunity to learn and think through it. And so I wasn't and am not defensive at all about this incident. But there are plenty of people out there that have not had the benefit of that kind of training, that it does feel really threatened when somebody calls them out for it. And I think that's another conversation I hope we'll get to this hour, Adair, is for our friends that have not had the benefit of that kind of training, how do we help them understand that intent versus impact concept?
Yeah, well, and I think there's one kind of aspect of this that I wanted to touch on a bit regarding that, and I wonder, you knew he was an Iraqi American man, right? Yeah, I mean, you're familiar with them. You met.
Yes.
Do you feel like you should have some responsibility to have had the foresight to realize using bomb thrower in the context of describing a Middle Eastern man could be problematic and should probably be avoided? Do you think that was a mistake, that you didn't see it before it was told to you?
Oh, of course it was a mistake. I didn't catch it. I think that's why I was so quick to apologize for it. Absolutely. I think the context and as I explained to people,
just be clear, it's not that somebody that offense was taken or that people took it, but you realize that it was offensive regardless of whether it offended the person that it was targeted towards.
Well, whether other people, so whether it was only the person, so intent versus impact is not limited just to the person that is the subject of the conversation, right? So it's not just the man in question that has a right to the impact being different than what I intended. Any number of people around him have the right to be impacted in a different way than it was intended. So I will just say, and I think there's a distinction, and this has been a lot of the conversation on Facebook this week as people have gone back and forth, the degree of this, right? Like, so I get it. I understand the impact it had. When I talk, as I've used this phrase, the reason I didn't think about it, Richard, is like, it's a phrase I use all the time to talk about people being disruptive, right? When I said that phrase, bridge builders, not bomb throwers, this is not the first time I've used that phrase. It's just the first time that I've used it in the context of somebody that might feel it differently. I think, if it was somebody else that I was talking to, if it was a white man that I was mentioning this to, I don't think it would have been received in the same way. And I think that's been some of the conversation that's gone back and forth. I'm not saying anybody's wrong for having the impact that they felt. But I think if you think about this particular phrase versus other phrases out there that are known racist terms that have been identified as racist for a very long time, I don't think that this phrase context necessarily, but again, that doesn't make it right that I used it. I just think I think it's a good context to understand why I might have missed it when I wrote it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think that's an important point because I know for myself, a lot of the time, like as Adair was talking about the way on our side of the situation, how these interactions typically go, another common go-to is, well, I didn't know it was going to be offensive. How should I have known it was going to be offensive? And so that understanding the thinking that went into using that phrase and how it could slip past, I think is an important context for people to have. The one other thing, and I don't want to dwell on it, and we're short on time, so but I want to I do want to touch on it. Along those lines, also is the idea of assault from the claim of assault from a white woman against a man of color. It becomes. I know Adair probably doesn't want us to delve into this as much, but I think it's important along those lines to understand that particular type of charge also has a certain kind of connotation to it, and that it looks like from the outside I could see how someone could interpret these events as you appealing to a certain demographic within the folks there at the party, where talking about an assault, and whether it was something that was, formally charges were filed because you felt threatened and you felt like you needed to be protected, or whether it was one of those things where technically it was an assault, but it's something that happens in the interaction of people, and especially in such a heated situation as the DNC convention, going back to the original incident.
So Adair, let me just answer one piece of this. I say Adair because Adair, I know, doesn't want to spend too much time getting into this part of the conversation. But Richard, to answer your question, and Richard, I'm going to share this, read a passage. Just, I'm not sure if you have read my statement, but I want to make it clear that I did not make some broad accusation of assault per se, right? I was very exact in my language. I was very specific in what I was talking about. And so let me just read you the sentence so you have the context of what I said. I said, during the DNC convention this summer, and in posting this, by the way, I redacted the name of the person because my intent was not to ruin his reputation, right? So when I posted this statement, I redacted his name. And you'll notice I'm still not saying his name because my point is not to ruin his reputation. So let me start over. During the DNC convention this summer, this man was aggressive and physically threatening towards me personally, and came into physical contact with me to remove my phone from my hands. That is assault and is unacceptable. And so I think in all of the ramp up in the last, since this happened, people have thrown around the assault term as if I provided no context and no definition for it. And that's not right. That's the statement. It's posted publicly for people to read. Difference. And I don't want to get into too much on this. We're going to have a whole nother day's conversation about definitions of assault and broader conversations around rape culture. And I know that's not the point of this episode. I know the difference. And I've known this man for 8 years. I've interacted with him many times. I interacted with him a lot in the month leading up from the state convention to the national convention. There was a clear line that was crossed that scared the crap out of me, to be perfectly honest. And it was a very scary, visceral reaction for me. And that's the part that I was sharing. I had plenty of interactions with this man in the month and the years leading before. So this wasn't an isolated incident, and it wasn't without context. And I hope, Richard, that helps to answer your question.
I think it's important to have the conversation take place in a way that people are familiar with familiar with the different sides in a way that, and it's touchy for me just because, like, again, I mean, I've been accused of being threatening and aggressive and stuff when essentially if it was a white woman doing the same thing I was doing, people would laugh at the presumption that it was anything considered to be aggressive. And so I'm a bit sensitive to that aspect of it. And so, like, for me, I wonder if you couldn't have, if you're looking back on it now, you don't think you could have made your point effectively without particularly citing a specific incidence of assault, and rather just made your case based off of I mean, I don't know, on his actual skill set or the lack of the skill set, rather than, I mean, is that the one reason that you think that he would not be qualified to take that position? Is that because of that interaction, or is there you said you have a long history with him, is outside of that, is there anything else disqualifying?
Yeah, I mean, I think the point that I was trying to make is that we need people that can have the interpersonal skills to bring people together, to bridge differences. We're a diverse group that does not agree all the time, and I did not see this person doing a good job of that, which is important when you're running for a leadership position in the Democratic Party. And in fact, I saw him cross a major line, which to me felt disqualifying. Now, we all have there's a lot of different opinions about this, and it's not something that we're going to solve today. Was there a different way for me to approach this? Honestly, if this person had not popped up with 2 days notice to run, I'm sure I would have handled it a lot differently. But to me, it felt disqualifying. I know people disagree with me on that. And I'm okay with people disagreeing with me on that. But Richard, I want to go to what you're talking about, because I think you're raising a really important thing. And you didn't use the phrase, but the phrase is implicit bias, right? I think that's what you're getting at is, was I just perceiving this guy as aggressive because of my own implicit bias? And what I'm telling you is this incident didn't happen in isolation. It was not a person I met the day before. So this interaction, I do not think was an implicit bias situation. But I want to acknowledge that implicit bias absolutely does happen. And the incident that you were just describing, Richard, where maybe you were perceived as aggressive and threatening, I mean, that's one of the major underpinnings of the national conversation we're having right now about deadly use of force and police and others feeling threatened by Black men, and they perceive them as aggressive. So I know the point that you're making, Richard, and I agree with you that exists. I do not think that was the situation here. given what I've shared with you. But I don't want to dismiss the fact that that is a real conversation that we need to have.
And real quick, I want to jump in. I've more or less excused myself from the conversation up until this point. Just again, because when we are talking about implicit bias, I want to make sure that my bias is friends with both.
Oh,
stated myself.
You're freezing up a little bit there.
Yeah, sorry, Dare, you cut out a little bit. We didn't hear what you said.
I just wanted my personal biases. Again, I am friends with both. So because of that, I have recused myself from the majority of this conversation from this point, and we'll continue to do so. But I did want to come in really quickly. I think this is developing into a really good conversation, so I don't want to cut it. I just want to point out that the man in question, well, I guess we've already used his name in an actual article. So my friend Majid will be on the air with Anoa, unless David, do you know if that she already interviewed him, or is he still an upcoming guest? This Wednesday. So this coming Wednesday, you can see Majid on The Way with Anoa. They will have this conversation as well. Once more, I'm going to recuse myself from this conversation. I would like to hear how it continues to go so that way I can try to maintain as much of Project Sanity's journalistic integrity as possible.
Sure. Thanks.
I think a lot of us are going to have common goals and common interest. And so it's going to be very hard in the future, just as on that point of journalistic integrity and all those types of things. It's going to be hard moving forward, finding the lines and walking them between, promoting or attacking and common goals. And so I think it's important that we try. The important thing, I think, is having the conversation out in public rather than in dark or in back rooms and stuff like that, where we're deciding how we're going to negotiate this type of stuff. Because if we're all familiar with the types of relationships that we're sharing, then I don't think that then people can make an assessment based on that rather than rumors and innuendo. And so
appreciate that, Richard. Yeah. So Richard, can I just make just two other really quick points?
Please.
So one, I think if I've learned anything in the last week and a half is that you don't resolve issues of this magnitude on Facebook. I have seen a degree of vitriol that is just not productive. I personally, have offered to meet with the man in question, with mediators and everything else, hoping to reach some degree of resolution. And I hope at some point he will take me up on that. The offer still stands, whether that's this weekend or next weekend. Once I get into legislative session, it's going to be harder. But, I think that these are heavy issues, and they're complicated, and they're not simple, and there are a lot of emotions, real emotions involved, that it is not a conversation that can be solved in, Facebook, warriors. So I personally, I've always been somebody really active in social media, and I've seen a complete and utter breakdown in human, just human interaction in the last week, watching this go back and forth on Facebook. The other thing I would say, and as we talk about intent versus impact, there are certainly people, whether it's because they don't know me or because they don't want to, or they have an agenda of some sort, have run with this narrative that this was intentional use for me, right? That I was intentionally using racist language. And, what I would ask as Adair opened up our conversation is there is a difference between our allies that make mistakes and apologize for them versus people who are racist and would never apologize because they believe it, right? And, it's, Richard, like I think you said earlier, Adair said earlier, like sometimes people's defense is like, well, I'm a liberal and I'm this and I'm that. Of course I couldn't be racist. My point is, go look at the body of work that somebody has done. It's not enough for somebody just to say, are they racist? But you could, for instance, look at the fact that within literally 3 weeks of being a legislator, one of the first bills that I co-signed was changing our deadly use of force statute here in Washington, which is the toughest one in the entire country. Prosecutors in our state say that our definition of permissible use of deadly use of force makes it nearly impossible to prosecute somebody in Washington state. 3 weeks into being a legislator, I co-signed that bill, and that was not a popular view with our police and our sheriffs here in the state of Washington, but it was the right thing to do. And those are the kinds of examples. It's not just that I'm saying, oh, I'm not a racist. I'm saying, look at the work that I have done. Look at the 5 years of work I did as the director of Progressive Majority, which is now Amplify, building towards racial equity and helping people of color and other folks underrepresented in public life to get ready to run for office. So that's the conversation. And I think, Richard, I'm committed to it. And I would love any feedback and guidance from you all about how do we help our friends understand the difference between our allies and our enemies, and how do we facilitate that conversation and learning?
I think that there's an important aspect to that about how we treat allies. When we all we're I'm pretty sure all of us are a member of some group that is considered whatever term we want to use, but that when somebody does something that doesn't match up with that, and how we approach correcting them, I think, is important. As you mentioned, some of the vitriol that's come your way, I think I've only seen little bits and pieces, but some of it is over the top. It just is. That's not constructive to the conversation. Even if you meant it how you said it, which I don't believe you did, and I don't think that you intentionally use this in that way. And so, but even if you did, coming back and doing it back at you, or being vitriolic back at you, isn't going to be, or with the people that defend you, or with people that support you, is not helpful to the conversation. And so I find it's hard to find that balance, though, because there's a lot of frustration among whatever group it is with the other groups that don't seem to get it still. Most of us have been most of these struggles have been going on for a very long time. And so go ahead.
Well, I would say training is one thing, right? And again, I have been the beneficiary of participating in really tough, thoughtful conversations in training, but also just by doing the work and being in the trenches alongside people of color and hiring them and having them on my team. I'm not defensive, but I am, think about other white allies that have not had the benefit of that training. And when they screw up, how do we call them out in a way that they can hear us? Right. And I'm not saying be delicate with white people's feelings. That's not my, but I think about things my dad's generation, right? And my dad in particular, where let's think about, a word that is offensive now, but didn't used to be. And there was a little bit of a transition period where folks, had to really kind of be like, hey, that's not okay anymore. I think of the word Oriental a lot, where my dad is 72. And I know my dad's intent, right? My dad, I do not think is a racist person, but in his era, Oriental was an acceptable term. And as he got older and as things changed, we had to be like, Dad, no, you say Asian Americans or Asian Pacific Islander Americans. You don't call them Orientals. And he's like, well, why? Right? It's sort of a generational shift, but I think sometimes you have to be thoughtful and intentional and compassionate, particularly when it's with people that you love and you know that they can get mad at you and they'll still love you anyway, like your parents or your grandparents or your aunties and uncles. There is I think a way to help people understand. Now, if they keep doing it and they keep screwing it up and they can't cop out every single time and be like, well, I didn't know. When you have evidence, you've told them, right? But I think that there's some balance there. And frankly, I'll just tell you, Richard, I had a fellow elected official who is a person of color reach out to me and say, how can we help facilitate these conversations so that we don't immediately put our white allies on defense? And I think that that's an interesting conversation from a person of color to me as a white woman of how can we think about that together and bring more people to the table that maybe haven't had the benefit of some of the stuff I have. Thought?
I actually want to jump in on this one because I feel like we moved past the point where I feel the need to recuse myself. But I'm gonna be real. I'm gonna drop some of the Project Sanity professionalism. I'm just gonna get real with y'all real quick because I'm not I'm gonna be real. Some of us are not that dude. I'm not that dude that you need to I'm not gonna coddle you. I'm not gonna feel bad. I'm not worried about progressing the daggum conversation. Once you hit that threshold, I'm gonna walk away or you're gonna catch a hot one to the mouth. We're gonna fight. Period. There is no ifs, ands, or buts about it. for a good example of that is at the Thurston County reorg meeting. I left the building and there was an older white dude and two white teenagers in rural America, folks, rural small town Olympia, Washington, talking about gun violence.
Small town happens.
And one of these kids comes up and is like, I need to have an automatic in case somebody. And I'm like, bruh, I've been ran up on. If someone ran up on you, you're gonna dookie in your drawers and you're gonna cry. Like you're not even gonna think to use a gun, dude. And his second argument, because a lot of times what I see with well-meaning white people is their arguments are rooted in racism, right? His second argument was, well, police are out here killing people, so I need a gun to protect myself from police. And I'm like, no, because they're not killing white kids. They're killing people that look like me. Yep. And when you carry that gun and when you threaten police and you don't die because of it and you instill that automatic fear in police officers that is then taken out as 12 bullets to the chest for me for walking down the street just existing, my guy, I've got a daggone problem with that and you're going to hear about it. Mm-hmm. Mind you, and sometimes we can walk away from the conversation. I chose to walk away from that one. He chose to follow me and got warned real quick. If you keep following me, I promise you, I'll put you to sleep right here on this daggone sidewalk because I'm not with that. And sometimes you're going to run into those folks, white people. Sometimes you're going to run into someone like me who just don't care no more, who has hit that threshold of I'm over this, I'm over you, and I'm over trying to be nice about this. And you're just going to have to deal with it. Like that's just going to that's going to be it is. Anyways, we're going to get back to more of this professionalism. Sorry for that, folks.
But Adair, I think there's a role for that. And I when we talked the other day, I shared this with you that I thought one of the most profound moments at the Democratic National Convention were words that came out of your mouth when everybody was all riled up and it was a tough, stressful time. And Adair said something to the effect of like, hey, white people, calm down and like stop creating trouble because the police are coming after me first as a black man. Like, knock it off, white people. And I was like, yeah, that needed to be said. Because there were a lot of people creating a lot of trouble and a lot of drama. And, they're protesting and they have their right. But Adair rightly pointed out to our white friends, they're coming after me first. And I personally, for me, like, I needed to hear that. And I hope other people received it in that same way, too, that they needed that reality check. So sometimes I think there's a role for that, Adair. And if that's how you approach it, like, that's your approach.
Well, that's appreciated. To give some context to that, folks, that happened at our morning meeting right after the walkout protest when we were in the media tent. There was a few of the white folks in that tent getting a little bit froggy with police, and mind you, police in riot gear. There was already snipers on the roof. It was a very tense situation just being at the DNC. You can check out some of our coverage actually here on Project Sanity of the DNC. You can catch my live streams there. But there was a lot of violence that was getting ready to pop off because some of these, I just want to call them anarchistic white kids started getting a little bit froggy and feeling themselves. And so, we have to keep that in perspective when we protest. That if you're out there, especially those of you that join Black Lives Matter marches, and especially y'all white folks that want to complain, well, they get violent. Let's look at who incites the violence. Okay, like let's take a hot second and really look at this. From being in Black Lives Matter protests, white anarchists in Seattle tried to shove a dumpster down the hill at police officers. Black folks, stop that. We're not trying to get shot. If we're protesting just being shot, we are not trying to get shot at again, period. Anyways, my life matters more than a store window anyway, so I say break all of them. But I'm going to go ahead and calm back down.
Well, there's also a good explanation of what allyship looks like as well. And I can't remember if it was in that conversation or another one, but what allyship looks like as a white person, but also a person in power. When Adair raised those, when Adair said that he was worried about getting taken out of the auditorium, two things happened. I said, take my phone number so that if you do get pulled out of the room, that you can call me so I can come find you and throw around my weight as, an elected official. The other thing that happened is Senator Bob Hasagawa, who is himself a man of color, said, Adair, I'm going to sit with you. I'm going to sit with you and protect you and use my power and privilege to protect you. That's what allyship looks like. And it's not just those individual moments, right? Like for folks in my district, we have this post-election panel that our now county council member does every year. And as, one of the elected officials in the district, I was given a minute or two to talk. And in a room that was probably 95% white people, I used my 2 minutes to talk about hey, I literally had people raise their hands. I said, raise your hand if you're a white person. That's what I did in my district. Almost the entire room raised their hand. I said, good. If you have not already thought about your own privilege as a white person, if you have not thought about what it is that we need to do in this new era of a Trump presidency and how our friends of color, our immigrant friends, our LGBT friends are going to be affected by this presidency, now is the time to really start thinking about it. I could have said anything in those 2 minutes, but that's what I chose to use my 2 minutes for. So that's what I mean by looking at somebody's track record and understanding not only what they say, but their actions to evaluate who they are as people.
And quickly, I was just looking over chat, and there's been some various conversations going on. And so I know part of what I think is important and what we really wanted to capture here is how do we move forward. And so we're aware how you felt about the incident at the DNC regarding the man that we were talking about earlier. And we're aware of how it's being interpreted and how people are feeling about it.
Yeah.
You didn't feel he was qualified for that leadership position at that moment, and you explained why. Is there? Can you talk with him? And can he be? Would that be a position that would be available to him in the future, and he could get your support if you guys could talk about what transpired and how to move forward and what he needed to improve upon? Just like if other folks still have issues with how you approach the situation and the terms you used, can they come to you? Is there a way for them to be redeemable to you? So first I'd like you to go ahead and.
Absolutely. So first and foremost, I mean, I will say that particularly for our group of delegates, that like almost 80 of us, I put in our group saying, if anybody wants to talk to me about this, I can't, I kind of said at some point, I can't keep up with Facebook anymore. So pick up the phone, give me a call. Here's my phone number. I'm willing to talk to anybody. And I've had some really good constructive conversations with folks. To your earlier question, Richard, is this something this man could redeem himself for and be qualified for something? Absolutely. I believe in forgiveness I have forgiven people for far worse things in my life, right? I believe in forgiveness, but I also believe that people have to take responsibility for their actions. So I really look forward, I would love to have a conversation with him, and it will, again, continue that invite, being open to sit down with him. But there needs to be a conversation about understanding the impact of your actions in the same way that I'm being held accountable for the impact of using what was perceived as a racist term. He also needs to take responsibility and understand the impact that his behavior has on people around him, and that he did make people feel threatened. And he made me in particular feel physically threatened and unsafe. And the fact that that is not being talked about more is a little disconcerting to me, but it's okay. I would rather have the conversation with him and talk about how that behavior can change and how we can move forward. That's more important to me than duking it out on Facebook with people I don't know and I don't think are actually looking for resolution. So it's a great question, Richard, and I would welcome the conversation.
And I have a lot of confidence in Anoa, and I strongly suspect she will hold him accountable for I know she's a strong advocate for women, and so I'm pretty sure she'll have some sympathetic or she'll be able to relate to that in a way that I think that she'll hopefully hold her accountable as I'm trying to hold you accountable.
I hope so, and I'll pass along some thoughts to her. But I think there's a real.
And I really hope you two, the two of you, can communicate. And ideally, I know maybe it's still hot right now, and so who knows? But hopefully, ideally, before he even comes on, that way he can talk about how you guys have come to a great resolution, and all the folks that have been wired up about this on Facebook can see that when you have the conversation and you talk these things out, you can come to a resolution that helps us move forward. And
I hope so. And I do hope that I really do hope we talk about the implications when you accuse somebody of lying, when you accuse somebody of being manipulative, when you say, well, you can't possibly be telling the truth if you didn't file an assault charge. All of these things, these are textbook things that happen in the context of rape culture. And I think more than anything in the concern, I will take responsibility for my actions, but other people need to take responsibility for theirs. And I want to make sure that we are working this out because what scares me and what's happened in the last week and a half, it's not about me, right? Like I'm a white woman, literally in power. I can fend for myself, but I am worried about the context that has been created for women or anybody else who feels physically unsafe to speak out against that. And what I have seen this week, whether or not people agree with the way I approached it, the part that's very insidious to me that I worry about deeply for the future of our party is that it didn't feel like I could express that I felt unsafe without being attacked. And I am seeing anybody who tries to show a shred of balance in that conversation being attacked online and very viscerally. So, you know, I hope that we have that conversation. I'm really looking forward to watching that show as well.
And with that, folks, I got it. It is 5:04. Noel, I know you had to run. We really do appreciate you coming on. Richard, I really do appreciate you taking the lead here and actually having that conversation. I feel like this ended up being broader and covering more topics than I had initially intended to. I do hope, Noel, that you will come back on in the future. Again, we'd love to have you come back on. So this again, folks at home, that is Noel Frame, state representative out of West Seattle or just normal Seattle, Noel? I can't remember what.
West corner of the city of Seattle, the 36th district. So
right, there we go, folks.
So much for the opportunity to be on the show. Adair, we've been talking about it since Philly. I wish it were under better circumstances, but really so honored to be on the show and look forward to being on it again in the future.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Okay,
love to have you again later. Bye. And hey, folks, all right, with that, we're going to jump right into our next interview. We have a special guest today who was recently booked.
Quickly, we're kind of towards the top of the hour, so I just want to remind everybody, thank you for watching us. Today we're broadcasting on the Benjamin Dixon channel as we had some technical difficulties at the beginning, but you make sure to check us out at projectsanity.org, the YouTube channel. Check us out on Twitter, and thank you all for joining, watching, being part of the conversation. I tried to incorporate the conversation I saw in chat as I could, but also focus on the topics that we thought were important. So again, thank you as being part of the show, and go ahead, Adair, and welcome our next guest.
Yes. Again, sorry.
Make sure to subscribe,
thank you again for that. Yes, please. We need subscriptions. Anyway, this is a person that was just recently booked. She is a friend of mine who is also a former delegate. She is dealing with some horrible things from her insurance company. Her name is Brittany App. And without further ado, Brittany, how are you doing this evening, rather, not afternoon?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for coming on. So would you mind giving our viewers some background as to what's going on, as much as you feel comfortable giving outside of what we've already promoted?
Yeah, of course. So a couple days ago, I had gotten a letter from my insurance company, which isn't unusual for me, as I have many chronic illnesses. And I had opened the letter from my insurance and I was reading it. And then the last sentence said, there will be changes to your following insurance plan. And this next year, we will be limiting your EpiPen usages to 4 pens in 12 months. And reading this letter, I was in shock because one of the diseases that I have, I go through EpiPens really, really quickly. Like this year alone, I've gone through over 75 EpiPens. And so being limited to 4 in a whole year is terrifying.
Absolutely. So, and that, folks, was something that we were seeing. Some of the speculation I've had when talking with one of my own friends, who's also friends with Brittany here, is that this is in response to the EpiPen hike. I mean, literally cutting an absolutely vital supply to life for you in the EpiPen. I honestly, I don't know what to say. I'm 100% in shock here. And so you said you got this just a few days ago. Is there anything that could be done? Is there anything that you think realistically we, at least, and by we, I mean those of us here, those of us watching, those that this story will reach, can do to help out? Like, is there some way to fight this? Is there some level of recourse when it comes to this?
I have tried contacting my pharmacy. I've left, insurance company, and I've tried leaving messages and they haven't gotten back to me yet. And so currently I'm just kind of holding out with my EpiPens and just like hoping I don't need it and praying that I don't need it and that I'm able to be to not go through my EpiPens because I'm starting in January. I'm only going to get 4.
Which is... and so you said, in speaking, I don't know if I have terrible short-term memory at home, folks at home. Concussions will do that to you. But you mentioned, at least in our green room, that in a good month, right? In a good month of dealing with this, you'll go through 4 EpiPens. In a bad flare, you can go through 4 EpiPens in a day.
Yep.
And I really want to express that to folks at home, that in 1 year, in 1 calendar year that her insurance company is talking about, they're talking about giving a grand total of 4, F-O-U-R, 4 EpiPens. The amount she can go through in a day. This is absolutely unacceptable. This is unacceptable for an insurance company to do to anybody, let alone someone who's already having to deal with other chronic illnesses on top of this. Mm-hmm. And part of the reason why we brought you on today is we want to get as much, Richard muted, by the way, we want to get as much info out there as possible.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had a question about who your insurer was. I didn't catch that if you said it.
I didn't. I have Premier Blue Cross.
So it's a private insurer, and you pay through is it part of an employment or?
I'm under my dad's.
Okay, so as part of allowed to stay on that insurance as part of the ACA currently. So I think that's important, as well as there's talk about possibly her even losing that access to those 4 EpiPens per year that she's getting right now, if Donald Trump has his way. And I think that's a very scary experience. I can only imagine. Go ahead, there.
So I wanted this is something I actually want to ask our folks at home to do. Folks at home, I think one of the things that the best ways that we can help Brittany, other than, of course, trying to get her as many EpiPens as possible, let's start tweeting Premier Blue Cross. Let's start calling Premier Blue Cross. Let's start actually. I know there's been a lot of talk recently about safety pins and how we help out people that actually could use it. Here's a chance where you can actually do something to help somebody out, and all it takes is for you to hop on Twitter or make a phone call. We do it already. Let's make sure that Brittany continues to get access to these EpiPens. Tweet your congressman. If you have any contacts in news media, tweet your local news media. Let's get this story to go viral, because this is absolutely a shame that somebody should have to fear for their life due to the fact that an insurance company doesn't want to provide life-saving medicine. It's crap.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, I'm sorry to hear about this, and I'm frustrated that we've allowed it to get to this point. And I mean, it's not disconnected from, as we talked about, the rising of the price of the EpiPen and the connections there within that we'd like to think, oh, well, if we vote Democrat, we can prevent that stuff. It's like, well, no, it was the daughter of a Democratic senator who is responsible for this. So she grew up in a Democratic family, most likely supports Democrats, probably not. It's not as simple as just vote D and you're going to have your health care will be safe. And so I think that's really important moving forward, going into the upcoming elections and moving forward under a potential President Trump. We have to know how we can go about making these types of changes. Go ahead, Adair. Sorry.
I know you're good. I'm absolutely agree.
Hello. All right, Brandon.
And we've got Brandon joining us, the absolutely terrible person. But,
Thank you. I just thought I would jump. I just thought I would jump in here because we've been talking a lot about a lot of the fears of the Trump presidency, but I think that her story really emphasizes the problems with the Affordable Care Act in general, and that it still puts our lives in the hands of private companies. And so, yes, while insurance has been expanded under Obamacare, it's been expanded in a way that is not necessarily sensitive to the realities of most people's lives. It's still being run for profit. It's still being run for a bottom line, when there are just simply certain aspects of a society that should not be for profit. And this, her story fits in very well with the recent. I know a lot of people know about the recent article out of the Daily Kos, where the head of Daily Kos wrote a piece, basically lambasting coal miners who he assumes voted for Trump for being about to lose their health insurance. Well, I mean, let's be honest. Most people's health insurance is not that great to begin with. Mo, it's costs are rising. More people are insured, but what does that really actually mean fundamentally? If most people still can't afford that insurance, they're going to have to end up just paying the penalty anyway. So I think we need to start seriously having this conversation about single payer. We need to start seriously having this conversation about Medicare for all, because ultimately Obamacare was a should always have intended to be a transitional piece of legislation towards single payer. I think that if anything, Obamacare has shown us the failure of the private insurance industry, because even when you have basically everyone being forced to buy private insurance, it still doesn't really work. Like, it just does not actually function in a way that we need it to.
Well, and what's the important delineation is that universal insurance isn't universal healthcare access or care. That simply being insured doesn't necessarily mean that you have access to any of the things that is promised to you in the insurance. Ask people, flood victims from various tragedies, ask people from earthquake, or people who have had insurance for these things, and suddenly once the event actually happens, their insurance doesn't translate into actual coverage and actual care. And so, and as we're seeing here in the case where she's able to stay on her parents' health insurance coverage, she gets 4 EpiPens, but that's not sufficient care. So that it's also like the with as far as employment goes, is the how many people are underemployed or go ahead. Sorry.
No, I mean, ultimately the job of a private corporation is not to care about the lives of people. That is why we have regulations. That is why we have all of these safety mechanisms built into our society to prevent them from overreaching, the control for externalities, to make them do the right thing. And so the idea that we put people's actual lives, like not simply, pollution, all these other aspects of their lives, of the environment, into their hands is frightening. You can't run people's lives based on a profit motive. And let's be honest, the life expectancy of Americans demonstrates the failure of this system. Because, despite people believing that life expectancy is going up, despite people believing that people are living longer, they really aren't, especially if you're not in the bottom 50% of wage earners. I believe Bernie Sanders tweeted out a scary statistics about the fact that in 2000, people are going to live an average of 12 days shorter in 2016 than they lived in 2015 or something like that. And so we've finally reached that point where this generation, due to a variety of reasons, one of which is health insurance and the lack thereof, along with pollution, climate change, all of the other things, are starting to live shorter lives, less fulfilling lives, less healthy lives.
Yeah, go ahead.
With it, I want to bring back Brittany back in real quick, and just kind of want to hear from you what you would ask folks at home to do, how we can best help you solve this situation, or what we can do to help out at all, before we get back into that broader conversation, of which, of course, I invite you to join in on, because I think you represent an end of the spectrum that is not talked about when we have these conversations. So I'd like to hear your thoughts on all of that, just really quickly.
Yeah, I don't even know what I need right now. I've had a lot of people, I've had my friend share. I have several friends share my status or share my Instagram post. And that's kind of how I found you. But basically, I've had some people be like, oh, well, just go get a vial of Epi and draw it up and then give yourself a shot. I don't have that much time. I don't have, when I'm going in anaphylaxis, I don't have time to get a vial of Epi, draw it up in a shot and stab myself. It has to be in that pen ready for me to have. And I guess I just want people to realize that this is a real deal and that EpiPens aren't taken lightly. I know recently too, in Thanksgiving, this little boy died from a peanut allergy that he didn't realize was super severe, and they didn't have an EpiPen on hand because they were so expensive.
Right.
This is more serious than people realize. EpiPens are life-saving, and when you have a rare disease that relies on your EpiPens, when you don't have them, it's just scary. I guess the biggest thing is just being aware of it and making other people aware that this is happening, that they're limiting Epi use.
And we appreciate you being willing to come onto the show and talk about that.
Have you? Or I just wanted to ask quickly go ahead, Adair, finish, and I'll.
Okay, I just real quick. I wanted to ask if you considered having starting a GoFundMe, and if you did, would you mind sharing that link with us so that way we could share that with all of our subscribers and I'm sure all of our Twitter followers between the three of us and the rest of the Progressive Army Network, because this is something where people can have a direct impact in life and not just tweet, call, email, and all that other fun stuff, which will hopefully get some results as well.
Yeah, I haven't thought about it yet. Recently, I've been focusing on finals, and then this kind of just got thrown in my mind, and so I'm just like, oh, finals, oh shit, EpiPens. But that would be one route to do, then just like not go through insurance to get the EpiPens.
Right. And good luck with your finals. I just finished mine, so I know how stressful those can be.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess my question would be: are you familiar with other people that have similar conditions or that have used EpiPens in a similar treatment that we may be able to help amplify all of your voices together by like grouping together?
Yeah, one of my best friends has the same condition, and she goes through EpiPens actually like more than I do. And there are several, like, I found people like through Instagram with hashtags, just hashtagging my disease. And that's how I found people, or through Facebook groups and stuff. And not everybody gets, like, with the disease that I have, not everybody needs an EpiPen. It just depends on how severe your disease, like, progresses.
Mm-hmm.
Because, like, on a range, like, sometimes people will just, like, get really bad flushing and itchiness, but other people, like, will go into anaphylaxis, and so it depends on the person and it depends on how severe their disease is. But yes, I do have some of my really good friends have the same disease and go through EpiPens and such.
Yeah, so if you come across more people that are dealing with, if there are other insurers that also have this same issue that are cutting people down, go ahead and forward that information to us, and we'll help try and get that out there, and so that people are aware and that people can do what they can to help.
Yeah, for sure. I haven't heard, but I will let you know.
Awesome.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much for that. And we welcome you to stay on for the rest of the show. We're going to move to more of our normal Project Sanity panel discussions for the next 40 minutes, folks. I just want to say thank you for sticking with us. You are watching Project Sanity, currently streaming on the Benjamin Dixon Show channel. I do believe Ben is going to be on tonight after us. So.
Yeah, 9:00. I actually so I'm going to interrupt here.
Wow, Brendan. Wow.
Yeah. No. You're watching Project Sanity on the Benjamin Dixon Show channel. Like, subscribe, comment if you'd like. So I listened to your interview with I'm being serious. I listened to your interview with with Noel Frame, and it was really interesting. Because I mean, that's not meant to be disingenuous.
I was going to say, do you say that like seriously, or do you say that in a branded way?
No, because it brought up a lot of issues that I think are important, even despite outside of the specific case. So I think there are a lot of disparate issues with that. So there is the fact that basically two wrongs don't make a right. Let's assume that Majid is guilty of some kind of assault, or I mean, for lack of a better word, or that she felt threatened by him. That's a disparate issue from the language she used in her condemnation of him. And so it behooves us to not absolve one because of the other in either situation. At the same time, I mean, and I think that's a fair thing to say regardless. I mean, it's a fair thing to say, we have two issues here. Let's not conflate them. One, whether or not even if her language was in fact racist, that does not absolve him of his wrongdoing if it did occur, and even if he did do what he did, that does not absolve her of her racist language. So it comes down to a situation where, how do you apologize earnestly? Right. It's like, how do you have it? Part of having an honest conversation is how do you apologize earnestly? And I was interested to hear what she had to say, but ultimately, and while I'm sensitive to her issues and I agree with her statements on rape culture, that the way in which she has been attacked is problematic. And this is one of the issues that we have with people in terms of rape coming out with assault accusations. The idea that if I am perceived as being lying, if I'm perceived as lying, it damages everyone else's case. So how do I put this forward in the most accurate way possible. I will say she put her foot in her mouth. Obviously, that goes without saying. I mean, that's undoubtedly true. I'm not particularly concerned with her what's in her heart. Her language was problematic. Intent does matter, but her language was inherently problematic. I think that we all know that. So it comes down to, I'm going to give everyone a lesson in how to apologize right now. Because if there's
cut in real quick and just thanks for having me. Great. For the rest of me, I got to get to class. So thank you guys so much.
Thank you so much for your time and your story. We appreciate you, and good luck with your EpiPens. So you have a great rest of the day.
You too, bye.
Thanks.
If there is one thing I'm good at, it is apologizing, because I do a lot of messed up things. So when you're apologizing to somebody or a group of people because you've done something wrong, here's what you say: I am sorry. I can offer no excuse for my behavior. Please forgive me. And if you cannot, I will accept the consequences. Period.
That's fair. That's
never say anything more. If someone asks you for why you did it, then you can offer your rationale.
But I think to her point real quick, and because you said that, the thing is, she was being questioned about why she did it, why she chose the words that she chose. And this comes from insider knowledge. And this is just because, again, I'm friends with both. So I'm friends with on Facebook with both of them. Is a lot of the comments weren't offer the apology, which she did, and I do have screenshots. I think I posted them in Slack. If not, I can grab them and we can post them on screen now. But she did apologize, and she did apologize right after she woke up. Part of the rationale that she's getting is because a lot of this is, and I do believe a lot of it was at least directed at people on Facebook. And this is, again, for those of you watching, I'm trying to be as unbiased as possible, just give you what I am seeing from Facebook. And on the Facebook, a lot of the critiques were, well, you were doing it on purpose. You were being purposefully racist. You didn't immediately, within 5 seconds of saying it, apologize. So therefore you must mean it. And let's be real. If there's a time difference, there's 3 hours, a lot's going on. The fact of the matter is she did apologize. She did own it. She did say, hey, there's no excuse. This is something I use. I apologize for it. And again, when I was on the phone call with her, my very first statement was, hey, you have to pay attention, because intent does not matter. Impact does.
Absolutely. Purposeful racism versus unintended racism will always be less important than that last word, which is racism, whether it's perceived as being racist or not. And this comes down to so this is another important thing to talk about, because one of the comments that we had was people who were there at the same time did not perceive his actions as being as aggressive as she did. And so this comes down to perception. Who is in charge of legislating what counts as assault, and who is in charge of what counts as racism? And I think, honestly, the Democratic Party is in an uproar right now. It's in a turmoil and it's tearing itself apart because of issues just like this, because of various minority groups fighting internally about what's going on.
Yeah, I mean, it's an excellent point. And I think it's like, that's why I pushed a little bit on the question about whether, or regarding the intentional or unintentional aspect, but that, do you feel like you had a responsibility to recognize that you knew you were talking about a Middle Eastern man, particularly of Iraq descent, Iraqi American, and you used the phrase bomb thrower? Do you think that you have a responsibility to be aware, like to have noticed that when it happened, when you did it, or when you wrote it, or when you sent it to somebody else to read? And it's like, it went through several layers before it got out there. And so, like, I think that speaks of something problematic within the organization or group itself, in that
I would just
something
say
like that could get to there before it even gets noticed.
I would just say that's society. It's going to go, because let's be real about it. A lot of times, and I'll be the first one. I put my foot in my mouth all the damn time.
Yeah,
because I don't think about it, because I don't realize it, because that impact isn't with me. But Brandon, you made a good point saying who legislates what's assault and who legislates what's racism. My response to that would be the person that feels to be the victim of racism or assault or whatever it might be. That's where we start from, and then we move forward. We look at the facts. We look at what happened.
Well, I mean,
that's how I feel about that, just generally speaking.
Well, I mean,
not necessarily.
I mean, that's true, and I appreciate that point, because everyone's feelings are different. But that's why we have something that we call a reasonable person standard. for a lot of stuff like this. Like, would a reasonable person be offended by what occurred? And I know who defines what's reasonable. I guess, this is a back and forth,
because it's also super subjective.
Super subjective. But ultimately, if someone feels like something is unreasonable to them, it's their right to bring it up.
Yeah,
it is. It's everyone's right to bring up whatever they like in a public forum, and they will suffer the consequences for that. And I think that's just the way accountability kind of works.
And I mean, to be fair, again, I feel that Majid absolutely was wronged in the way things were done, in the language used, and I've expressed that to Noel before. I've already expressed that, and I've expressed that to Majid, that hey, things happened that weren't acceptable. I also feel, though, that you cannot, because someone represents an establishment that you don't like by being a member of that group, I feel that it's also wrong to just say, well, you're making stuff up to be sensational. Right? I very much believe, and I testified to Noel's character earlier, I'll testify to Majid's character now. I very much don't feel that Majid is a violent person. But again, you just said reasonable standards. And as I just said earlier, if someone tells me I feel I've been assaulted, I'm not going to say, well, no, you haven't. Right? I'm not going to say that that's just not acceptable to me as a human being. So what I've chosen to do for the most part is I've chosen to remain out of these arguments, out of this, back and forth between the two, because I wasn't in the ADA section in Philly. I was a few, like 20, 30 feet away during the what do you call it? The DNC. So it becomes this kind of balancing act where I think the Democratic Party is ripping itself in half on two fronts. On one front, and really on three fronts, I think there's some people, and I think we can all agree to this, there's some people that like drama just to have drama be there. Like, period. I know you do. And that's exactly that's the point I'm making. Some people like to have drama just to have drama. Some people have legitimate claims on either side of this, right? Like, so I think there's been three factions in this, and I think there's been a whole lot of BS going on. And it's,
everybody's still hot. The political climate is hot right now. Everybody's hot. Everybody's firing off at like level 10 immediately. And that's just part of the climate. And I think that context is kind of important to the people's comments. It doesn't give them license to do it, but it does give us some understanding. I
think Richard's right. No one knows where to direct their ire at, because everyone's feeling a little bit hypersensitive. I think people on the progressive side are feeling hypersensitive about a lot of things as well. And in terms of the Democratic Party and where it's at right now, with Keith Ellison coming out in support of the, was it Biddle or... Basically, with Keith Ellison coming out in support of the billionaire who wants to be the head of the Florida Democratic Party, or whatever you call it. The Democratic Party is kind of dead to me at this point. Like, the Democratic Party, in terms of whether it can be saved, whether you can save the soul Democratic Party, no. I don't think that it's salvageable. I think that at this point we have to come to terms with the fact that Democratic Party, as an infrastructure, despite it being so widespread, its ubiquity and its power, though useful in a lot of ways, has its own agency. And that
I think just quickly, I just wanted to say that Ben showed a clip with Harry Belafonte asking a really important question. I think is there anything in the Democratic Party worth saving? And so, but continue your point.
I think when people talk about what in Democratic Party is worth saving, they're talking about the fact that the name recognition. They're talking about the Democratic Party's name is national. The Democratic Party apparatus is ubiquitous. It's in every state. It's in every state, every county. Everyone has heard of it. And so, how can we abandon such name recognition when the other side is not going to abandon theirs? This is sort of a mutually assured destruction type of thing. If Democrats dim exit and Republicans don't, I don't know what you call it, I can't think of a good pun. If they don't leave as well, it puts the Democrats at, and it puts progressives and people on the left at an inherent disadvantage. So a lot of this is just, I don't know what you'd call it,
I feel like red exit works.
I'm sorry, but I feel LF exit is the best one that out of all of these. Like, that's just funny.
I just like the red because of the communism thing and the Russia.
It becomes, no more Russia. No more Russia until we get some evidence. Please.
That's next. That's next week, folks. We'll be talking about
Russia.
Syria and its repercussions, including Russia.
So the exact thing that people are talking about is the benefit of working with the Democratic Party, i.e. their ubiquity, i.e. all of their tools, all of the money, the apparatus, is exactly what makes them really hard to change. So at a certain point, we're talking about the agency of the structure of the Democratic Party itself, and not just individuals within that party. At a certain point, we're talking about institutional inertia. The Democratic Party exists, in that structure exists to further certain goals. And no matter who is brought into that party, who's put in head of that party, they're going to feel that pressure to kowtow to those goals. They're going to feel that structural pressure to change themselves, bit by bit, to fit the mold of what the Democratic Party already does. And they might, make small changes, but at a certain point, the kind of radical shift that we need with the Democratic Party might not be possible if we're still talking about maintaining the good parts that we want, which is essentially just name recognition. People want that brand name. People want to put, basically what people want is to put a new soda out, but call it Pepsi.
But here's the thing, though, is at one point people didn't think you could change the Democratic Party from being this super liberal, well, at the time, super liberal group, right? Like, I mean, you've seen radical party shifts. You've seen conservatives go from being Dixiecrats to being Republicans. You've seen the shift from Democrats being actual liberals to being conservatives. They just call themselves liberal. I mean, so there's a lot of different things that can and do happen. I mean, is it going to be an overnight shift? No. Do I think there's merit in trying to do it? Yes, but I also happen to think there's a lot of merit in trying to build other parties. I think that there has to be more than just the two. I think the Democrats are a very specific group for a very specific kind of people. And I think they're trying to be more welcoming. I think they're trying to open that umbrella wider. But I think that, hey, you know what? Progressives, socialists, communists, it's time to really start building up these other parties. It's really time to start building up the Greens. It's really time to start building other means of getting your voice heard.
I agree. And I'm not talking about a wholesale abandonment of everyone who claims to be a Democrat, but we do need to start picking and choosing. And, there are some people who can be saved. There are some, talking about a coalition. There are some local Democrats who are absolutely progressive. They're absolutely worth bringing, into the fold of a progressive coalition. But at the same time, we're talking about a decision that needs to be made not out of fear. I think a lot of people are making this decision to work within the Democratic Party out of fear of Republicans, fear of Trump, fear of having to go off in the wilderness by themselves and not having that sort of backing, being part of that sort of team sport. So for everyone condemning the notion of blind voting in team sports, putting a D by your name is part of that inherent desire to be part of a widespread team, to define yourself as either red or blue, and to get some of emotional self-worth or social self-worth from being a quote unquote recognized liberal and not of an edgy liberal, because people want to be different, but they don't want to be too different. They want to be sort of, I'm a progressive Democrat. But at this point, 2005, Harry Belafonte was sitting between Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama and asking both of them, is the Democratic Party worth changing? Is the Democratic Party worth saving? Can you save the soul of something that might be inherently soulless? And watching Nicole, I'm sorry, what?
Yeah.
No, show it.
Yeah, show it.
Show it. We'll get tell me when it's queued. Tell me when it's queued up. And listening to Noel Frame speak, and this is not to make the statement that she's doing this, but you sort of hear these beats, you hear these words like ally, and you hear people move their mouth in the right way and the right sounds come out. But it's just like Harry Belafonte said, how do you know if they have any meaning? Because Democrats and neoliberals, and that's what makes them neoliberals, are very good at the speech of the movement. They're very good at throwing around words like intersectional and ally, and they know the difference between queer and non-binary.
But that's when you actually get involved, right? The only way you can know that is if you're involved. The only way you can know that is if you get to know these people. So like I said, I've been able to speak to the character of both Majid and Noel because I've gotten to know both of them. I'm able to speak to the character of people that have recently become state committee people, members of the Washington state version of the DNC, the State Central Committee, because I've gotten to know who these people are. So I've gotten to know how they live their daily life, how they act when when cameras like ours aren't around, platforms like ours aren't there, when they're not just campaigning, but when they're just being their most authentic self. The only way you can know is if you get involved and you start meeting these people. I guarantee you, your local politicians want to learn who you are, want to match names with faces. I want those people, and I think that's something we've got to start promoting, because you're right, you can't know.
Absolutely,
you can't know is by getting there.
You can't know. It's like the old Irish saying, "You don't know till you go." But I fear that joining a Democratic Party too deeply is like being a frog in a boiling pot of water.
So they don't join the party per se,
or rather, even getting too involved. Like you become subject to getting too involved with people, and getting too close to anything that you should be inherently opposed to is dangerous, because if you know the personal, I'm sure if we all hung out with Bill O'Reilly, we might start liking him. We might
Brandon, do I call you out on your crap?
Actually,
you say something?
O'Reilly, so
you do, but my point is that the political and professional and social, the professional and political aspects of the Democratic Party might be disparate from the personal aspects, if that makes any sense. So while
that makes sense, but what you're saying, but what you're saying is well, we can't know because they talk the movement, but we don't know if they walk the movement. What I'm saying is you can't know unless you get to know these individuals. Party aside, you have to get to know these individuals, but we'll continue this conversation here in a second. David just let us know rather that the video is ready. So David, if you can cue that up and play it, please.
So here's a short clip of Harry Belafonte several years ago. It's not the full thing because that's about 15 minutes long, but it's about 45 seconds, and this captures the gist of what we're discussing.
Thank you.
The last thing Dr. King said to me before he was murdered, Martin said, I sit here deeply concerned that I suspect we're leading our nation on an integration trip that has us integrating into a burning house. Most of the politicians I know of make promises only to walk into the places of power and then deny us. I guess part of the reason I'm here is to really look through the ravages of the Democratic Party and see if anything is really worth salvaging.
Okay, so folks, go ahead, David.
Let me turn my mic on here. I love the politicians' faces when he was discussing that. They're nodding their heads going along with it, and just to hear it, when they realize what he's saying, it's like, no.
Right.
Yeah, Hillary's face is very transparent in that particular one. She worked on that quite a bit since then. Like, her emotion was all over her face on that one. But I think Brandon brought up a point that's really important that I usually incorporate into a larger thing I think of as far as our democracy in general, but institutional inertia. And is the institution of the Democratic Party fundamentally flawed in such a way, or fundamentally designed in such a way that it can't be repurposed in the way that progressives want to repurpose it, without dismantling and restructuring that entire thing? And is that possible? I think is a bit of what I think is the question.
Because I want to touch on that right now, because you just asked a good question. Is that possible? Is that something that can even be done? So here's two things. The Democratic Party, at least as we've been speaking of it, we're talking about the big picture, right? The DNC, the folks stationed in Washington, D.C. that run everything nationally related to the Democrats. But what is that made of but the 50 states, right? So each state's Democratic Party sends representatives to D.C. Those are the folks that make up the Democratic Central Committee, are people from each and every one of these states. They all come together and then they make this huge apparatus. Each of those states undergoes something called reorganization once every 2 years. So you have the choice between getting involved in reorganization. And by the way, folks at home, we will actually be bringing on in about 2 weeks possibly trying to have a special episode of Two Black Dudes on a Sunday, where we bring in folks that have actually joined in those reorganization efforts and have won. People that at least I personally know, and that's why I'm able to get them on, or people that I've heard of from friends that I know, people that have bona fide progressive backgrounds to join these positions. Former guests include Kat Williams. She's now the first vice chair of the King County Democrats. We have people like Chad Lupkis, who was here with Progressive Army for quite a while. He's now a state committeeman out of King County. So we've got people with actual bona fide progressives. Richard, you can speak to Chad being progressive as well as I can. Actually in positions of power within the Democratic Party, legitimately affecting change on the state level first. So yeah, I think it's possible because the Democratic organization has reorganization every couple of years. So we just have to actually start using that apparatus to change, because then we can change the rules. Then we can change everything else. And I just got a message from our producer, David. He thought I was talking about the comedian.
Well, it's not that. No one is saying. I don't think anyone is saying this.
Different cat ways.
I don't think anyone is saying that it's impossible. I think that people are saying that it might be a fool's errand. It might not be worth the trouble. And to that, I can be sympathetic. That if you're a progressive, it might be easier to start from scratch. It might, to paraphrase, Harry Belafonte, maybe it's not worth pretending to play house with the Democrats in the ashes of their party. Let's be honest, Democrats have failed. They failed.
Who's playing house with them? What I'm suggesting is fundamentally different.
Keith Ellison is playing house with them.
And that's fine. And Keith Ellison can play all he wants. But what I'm saying is there has to be a fundamental change at the state level. There has to be a fundamental difference. I think they're starting a new party.
Hold on. I think Derek makes an important point real quickly, and I'll get you in, Brandon. Derek makes an important point about how these national organizations are formed by the states. So if a majority of states are leaning progressive, like we're getting King County, Thurston County, and Washington State, and Washington's already leaning left, so it's not as tough as a battle for us, but it has its own like troubles in that it's a much smaller difference between the progressive wing versus the more establishment Hillary wing. There's more blending there than there is in some other states where it's a much more stark line. But it's about winning that if it's going to happen, that's how it has to happen. And Adair's making the point that it is happening, at least over here. And so now whether it's a viable option, whether I'm leaning with Brandon in that this doesn't get to the national level without running into that institutional inertia and falling prey to it. But go ahead, Brandon. Go ahead and get in there now.
My point is largely this. And when I say people are playing house, I think people are being seduced by the notion that there is already this structure built that is functional, and that to start building a new structure would, leave you out in the dark, in the cold for a very long time. But my larger point, the Democratic Party, because of the DNC, has failed at every level. They failed at the state level. They failed at the local level. They failed at the national level. They failed. They did win on fundraising.
They did win on fundraising. They've raised more funds than I think any presidential campaign before.
But that's more embarrassing to raise more funds and then lose. Like that's not a boon.
At least more than Trump.
But here's my point. My point is this: I think there is a worthwhile endeavor to work within the Democratic Party. No one is denying that. But I do want people to be aware that you are really fighting two-fronted battle. You're fighting a war on two fronts. You're fighting the Democratic leadership, and you're also fighting the Republicans. You are fighting both sides, and both sides inherently, if you're a progressive, do not want you to succeed because it means dangerous things for their position of power. So my point here is that people are being seduced by the structured Democratic Party, but being seduced by this house. We want to come inside and be warm. And it's like, but for the Democratic Party, a lot of that is just, pomp and circumstance. Democratic Party is full of failures. They failed. It's like, so is the house really actually there?
My
point is, I think a lot of Democrats live in this bubble and they are playing house. They're playing house in the ashes of a once great party that just happened, like of a once great, of a mansion. They're playing in the ashes of a mansion and trying to sort of, if we can take over these ashes, and like maybe we can, do something. It's like, but really,
you're conflating what I'm saying.
Can you?
So what you're saying is you're saying that people are just kind of essentially rolling in the dust and saying, "Whoa, look at how great!" Like you're basically bringing up member berries. Like that's essentially what you're. For those of you who don't know, that's a thing from South Park. It's all about nostalgia. You should just watch this last season. It's really great. But what I'm saying is, how do you rebuild a house? You start from the foundation, and the foundation of the Democratic Party has always been the state and local parties in all 50 states. I'm starting to see a lot of the progressive groups out here that are coming together, not only trying to build up the Green Party, trying to build up the socialist alternative and things like that, but they're also sending people that are like, I really want to try to rebuild the Democrats, not remodel, but tear the whole damn thing down and build it from the ground up, starting with the foundation, and that foundation is all 50 states. So what I'm saying is that it's a worthwhile endeavor. You can talk about institutional inertia all you want, but if you dismantle it from the ground up, then you dismantle that inertia. You're going to have the name recognition because you can, like, it's like me saying, I have a restaurant, right? This restaurant gets really, really popular. And then for some reason, I have this big scandal go down. Should I just burn down the restaurant and just go start a new one 50 miles away? Or could I say, hey, all right, you know what?
Sometimes yes.
Sometimes
yes, you do.
No, you don't. Because what you do is you say, I made a mistake. I'm going to own that mistake. Let's fix this from the ground up. And so that's what a lot of people are saying. I don't think either approach is better than the other.
I agree with you. I'm not trying to shame anyone for deciding to work within the Democratic Party and try to change that. That is absolutely a worthwhile endeavor. I'm not trying to say it's a fool's errand and it can't be done. I'm trying to say it's going to be incredibly hard and incredibly arduous and probably incredibly thankless from the party you're trying to save for a large portion of the people who are doing it. As Keith Ellison found out, despite the fact that he makes, he's not too progressive, like he still got attacked for being anti-Semitic. Like it's a thankless job for a lot of people. So if we're going to continue with the analogy of a house, sometimes you don't follow good money with bad money. That's a logical fallacy. That's called the sunk cost fallacy. You don't follow good time with bad time. You don't follow bad time with good time. You don't invest more effort into something simply because you've invested effort into in the past. And so we're talking about the foundation of the Democratic Party. They're just ideals. Like they're just like, you can take your ideals anywhere you go. And if the foundation of the Democratic Party has become so corrupted by money, corrupted by corporate interest, corrupted by X, Y, and Z, that your foundation has termites, then for some people, and this is not to shame anyone who decides that this is not the way to go, then it is a lost cause. And underselling how arduous it's going to be to change the Democratic Party does not serve to help anybody, in my opinion. So I'm not trying to shame anybody. And I do agree, if you're going to change the Democratic Party, it has to start at the local level. It has to start at the local level. It's going to be a long-term thing. It's going to take a long time. And it needs to start at the local level because it's not as though Democrats are winning state legislators. It's not like though Democrats are in charge of the majority of states in the United States. They've lost those too. Right. So it's not like they're not doing anything right, is my point. So I think a lot of people are getting drawn into the brand. They're getting drawn into this two-party system when, from my perspective, there is no salvation within the Democratic Party. There is none because the only salvation lies in a multi-party system. So while I think in a short-term goal needs to be to reform Democratic Party, a long-term goal needs to be a multi-party system because that's the only way we can disrupt the problems that we saw emerged during 2016 election. So in terms of like Keith Ellison being elected or anyone, even Bernie Sanders being head of DNC, that doesn't solve the problem to me. There is no fix to the problem within the Democratic Party, the larger problem of money in politics within the Democratic Party. There is no solution there.
I mean, there is a solution.
We are running up on the end of the show, and I want to make sure to give David, since he was kind enough to help us with production today, I want to make sure to give him enough time to get everything set up for Ben's show or you do all the things he normally does before Ben's show. But so we got a couple minutes left. So I guess just closing thoughts time. I guess for me, I think we had a very valuable conversation with Noel. I really hope it was helpful and informative or, expository for those people that tuned in, especially for that conversation. And I think we're going to have a lot more of those conversations. And I think it's rare that we find somebody that deals with that as well as Noel did, even if it wasn't perfect. Like, as we mentioned, a lot of people just saying that they said something racist is enough to set them in a mode where you're not really talking to or you're talking at each other at that point and not with each other. And so I really thank Noel for being willing to come on and being able to say your position, and want to thank everybody for watching, and thank you guys for being patient with my technical issues, and I'll pass it off. Brandon, I guess.
Oh yeah, I know I didn't really have a big role in tonight's show. Thank you. I'm going through some personal things right now. Thank you guys for filling in for me, and well, I mean, not really filling in. Thank you guys for putting on such a great show in my absence, and thank you all for watching.
And folks at home, I just want to say thank you again for watching. This has been Project Sanity on the Benjamin Dixon channel. Please stay tuned to watch the Benjamin Dixon Show. The big bro is doing it great out there. Follow up from our earlier conversation. You can see the interview with Majid on The Way with Anoa this coming Wednesday. Another shout out to the big sis, because she's doing absolutely amazing things with that. Please continue to support us, support the whole progressive army. You can catch Project Sanity, hopefully at the usual time of 7 p.m. Eastern on Thursdays from here on out. Follow me on Twitter at Adair Schmidt at capital PS. Hope to talk to you all there. And I mean, we're out. Oh, real quick, Catch Two Black Dudes show starting on Sundays. Brandon, you'll get a say in this. Anyway, catch y'all later.
Have a great night.